things about their body, like how fast they were taking off, how much.
So welcome, Shelley. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And also want to acknowledge my colleague, our Senior Director of Events, Hillary Weldy, who I think you all know, and all of our members in attendance tonight. So thank you all for joining us. So with that, let's get to the tasting. You guys are in for a treat because Cristin Moxy Castro is our host. Moxy is the Central Region Sales Director for Demesne Estates and Heights and is a longtime Wine and Food Foundation board member. Moxy is nothing if not creative, and the idea for tonight's session was all hers. How can you not get excited about taco and wine pairing? So we've all been really excited about this. So we are lucky to have her here tonight and on our board. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Moxy, and I'm going to go ahead and get your slides set up. Hopefully you're here and can hear us. Let's see. Oh, I guess she's signed in, but not quite here. She's just texting me. Tell them I want to get it. Oh, she said she was picking up her tacos because she wanted them to be hot for the class so that she could really explain the food focus of this, and she got caught in traffic. So why doesn't everyone else tell us what I got the duck tacos from Nishta, and I'm very excited. I haven't tried them yet, but the smell is wafting in front of me. What has everyone else gotten to eat tonight?
I got the taquitos from Discada, and then also the duck from Nishta, and I also got a bean and cheese taco from there, and the creamy corn something or other from there too. So awesome. Because I couldn't get the street corn from Discada, so I got something corn-based here because I know Moxy wanted to talk about that in terms of texture.
Yeah. Cool. Anyone else eating anything good tonight? Margaret got the tacos, the array from Nishta, right? And Jay and Jackie, did you guys get tacos too?
Guys, can you hear me? It's Moxy. Can you hear me?
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I did a run of all the tacos on Saturday night, and I really wanted to get some Discada, and they ran out of corn this afternoon, so I went to get the tacos, and I apologize. I got locked in traffic. I had sent the presentation earlier today to Denise, and we had talked about all the details, so I wanted to make sure that she was sharing the screen and can happily start walking through. I'm about to walk through my front door, so welcome to the class. Sorry that it's partially in my car, but I wanted to start with you guys on time. But one of the things I want to talk about tonight is the theme kind of that I think about when I think about pairing everything, but certainly when I think about pairing Mexican food and also Asian street food, is temperature, texture, and taste. And I hope that if we walk away with one thing tonight, besides having a great time and experiencing something we don't normally experience, is wine with tacos and interior Mexican food, is this idea of temperature, texture, and taste. And so I think we lean heavily on taste when we think about pairing. For me, the number one thing I think about is actually texture. And I've shared this many times, and Denise and I were talking about it earlier in the week. And this is a really great experience when you're tasting street food, because street food, because it's flash cooked mostly for both Asian and Mexican food, and we'll talk about the cooking devices tonight that are used, you always have an element of fat that is in the food. And so this grasa in Spanish,
I think we lost her.
sorry, I hope I'm still connected. I lost you guys. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We left off when you said grazza.
Okay. So can you guys still hear me now? Hillary, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So I think this element of there being a base of a really hot implement so that you can cook it quickly on the street or quickly on a taco stand is super important. And you've always got this element of fat in the food. And in the case of a lot of these tacos, you've got it coming usually from a mixture of ingredients. You've got beef, duck, sometimes you've got tripas, you've got beef tongue. A lot of
I think we're losing you again, Moxy. Looks like she signed off and is going to sign back on.
Sorry, guys. Can you still hear me?
Yep, we've got you back now.
Yes? Sorry. We're just talking about this element of fat in the food and this being one of the key components for street cooking, and the fact that you're using different kinds of ingredients and that the fat base for this flash cooking is really important, and it creates a really important textural element. And so you usually have an element of fat in the food that creates a great opportunity to pair and to think about texture with wines. That textural element usually lends itself to needing food that's got really fresh acidity, and also lend itself to wanting to create a pairing where you don't have too much conflict with tannin in the wine. And so in this case, I selected a Tempranillo-based wine, which can have tannin, but in this case, the tannin only comes from the Tempranillo. It doesn't come from extended heavy American oak aging. And so you want to stay away from those wines, and you want to come to some wines that have some depth of complexity, but absolutely have freshness. And so that's the reason. Really interesting textural component, the Albarino, the Grinolino Rosé, and the Tempranillo. And so I don't know how many of you selected all three of the wines, if you've selected one wine in particular that you want to pair with. But one of the themes I think that's really fun to explore with pairing
Think we lost her again. Hopefully she'll come back as quickly as she did last time. There she is. Moxy, you there?
Hey guys, I'm walking through my front door. I'm sorry, it's going to be a much better connection. I apologize.
Great. Well, I'm going to try my tacos while she's doing that. Oh my God, those duck tacos are delicious. Just hang tight, guys. I know she'll be back in a second. She's texting.
Team, can you hear now?
Yes.
So sorry. So I cannot connect with the computer and this at the same time and didn't want to disconnect again from you. So I want to take you through the presentation since Denise has got it up. And I'm hoping you can see me.
Yes. Yeah, much better.
With tacos in hand. Sorry about that. I didn't want
No
to lose
problem.
the tacos.
Just holler when you need me to click the slides.
Thank you very much. So I want to talk a little bit about the cooking implements that we would talk about. So there's a lot of things that make Mexican street food amazing. And we talked about that element of there being the fat in the food. Really important because you're going to flash fry most of that food. When you think about Mexican street cooking, you've got kind of 3 or 4 major implements that you would use that you would think of when you talk about really, and I'm going to talk about Mexico City as really that key element of what we're talking about as kind of what we're moving from tonight. So the first of those things that we would think of is hold on one second so I can see the slides with you. Is a trompa. And this is usually used for tacos al pastor. And we're going to go to slide number 5. So if you go to the La Trampa and slide number 5, this is something that you guys, if you've traveled, have probably seen on the streets of Mexico. And it is kind of a rotisserie. And it was brought to Mexico actually by Lebanese people. And it became a tradition in Mexico too. You'll see it when you think about getting a gyro. This is done mostly for El Pastor, where they would cut the meat on the side. Now, most of the tacos that you guys have in front of you tonight, depending on what you ordered, I know that everybody got a mix of things from the taquitos, discada to cuantos tacos. This is something though that you see really frequently, and this is kind of the difference between tacos that are done on an open stove, in a skillet, or if you'll see kind of a cooktop where you'd see kind of eggs and so forth be made, that might be stainless steel. Or this is a slow roasted rotisserie type style of cooking. And tacos that are done in this way just have an incredibly slow cooking, savory element. And the tacos that I love mixed with this are things that have that zesty, high-toned acidity, like the albarino here today with us. The Doferia is such an incredible brand. This wine has so much texture in it also that it tends to break through these kind of slow cooked savory elements. And there's also a salinity that you find in Albarino that I think is an excellent component with El Pastor and some of the tropical elements that you get, like you would serve with pineapple, for example, with a lot of pork dishes and really kind of high-toned tropical fruits. It's a really awesome pairing. It kind of blasts off in your mouth. And that's really fun. And I think it's the cooking implements that make the difference. So I want to go back to slide 2 and talk a little bit about the chorizera. If you guys have ever stood in front of a Mexican taco stand, if you've been in Mexico City, or if you went to Cuantos Tacos, or if you have been to some of the places like Taco West and San Antonio, you notice that there is this big cooking pot. And then you'll see in the slide here, you've got kind of a raised portion in the middle. And this is a really important piece. And did anybody get suadero tacos from Cuantos Taco today? Anybody out there? No? Did anybody go to Cuantos Tacos? No, okay. So this is the really traditional style, and it's the only place in Austin I'm aware of that does this. And so it might be something fun to try with the wine pairings that we're going to go with tonight. This is the traditional cooking method. So the suadero is the part of the beef usually that is right between the belly and the ribs. And so it does include a lot of belly and rib meat. So it can have a really good deal of the pancha, or where that grease comes from that makes it really nice, this long cooking. But what normally happens in a chorizera is that you have all the meats cooking together at one time. So when you go to the taco stand, you usually only have 5 or 6 options. You can order tripas, you can order suadero, you can order the lengua or the tongue. You have a lot of different options. And and they'll all be inside the choricera. And the choricera is going to have this cooking all day long. And so what you're going to get is this melange of flavors, even though you're going to choose primarily one meat per taco, you're going to get this mix of very savory and saline elements all mixed in. Now, the great thing about the choricera is it's got the portion in the middle, and that's that cooking implement that is kind of raised from the rest. So while all the meat would be marinating around the choricera, when you're done with the suadero, which is kind of like a Mexican version of brisket, like our closest thing to the brisket, would be finished and seared on the very top. As soon as you would ask for it, it would come out of the kind of soup that is marinating around, and it would come up on top and be seared. And so there, again, we talk about you getting this incredible texture where you get these kind of crispy elements, much like you think about burnt ends in barbecue. And that mixed with Rioja or with the Albarino in particular is absolutely fantastic. The elements of the Albarino that I think really pop here are there's really fresh acidity, and there's really bright lime fruits that really cut and play, because you usually finish the suadero with cilantro, lime, and onion. Very simple. The preparations when you get these Mexican street tacos typically only include those things. Occasionally, if they take license, they might add avocado. They might put a salsa on it, but really, really rare. The very traditional way of eating these is cilantro and onion and lime, and that's it. So I encourage you guys to try Los Cuantos Tacos, because it is a really authentic experience of going for Mexican street tacos in Mexico City. And is there anybody out there that's got the Heights Granulino Rosé open? Okay. And Hillary, I wanted to make this interactive because I thought it would be so fun if we all went taco truck hunting together. You're having it with the duck taco. How are you experiencing the Heights Granulino Rosé?
Well, I have it open, but I don't have it in my glass. So hold on, I will go get another glass, because I've had a couple bites with the Albarino and I thought it was delicious. And I also had it with the taquitos, which are all gone now.
Right.
And that was a phenomenal pairing. I mean, they were so like unctuous and crispy, but then they had this like super bright freshness from the onion and the cilantro. And that, I felt like that paired really well with this delicious Albarino. So hold, I will go grab a glass of the rosé and I'll let you know how it pairs with the duck.
Hold that thought. Yeah. I mentioned that because I know Hillary had said that she had pulled the duck. I don't know if anybody else out there has the duck taco, but duck tends to be a meat that has a great juiciness to it if you don't overcook it, but as a poultry item tends not to be as fatty as we would think of with pork and with beef belly and things like that. And so this wine in particular, the Heights Granulino Rosé, is made from a direct press of Granulino. And Granulino is a grape which is from northern Italy. You don't find grown in the United States very often. It is a grape that doesn't have a lot of juice to skin ratio. You don't get a lot of juice for everything that you press, but what you get a tremendous amount of flavor. And one of the things that is common for Granulino, whether it's red or in a very rare case like this where you might find it in a rosé, is that it has incredible texture, because there are a lot of pips inside the seeds when you crush the grapes and you're processing to make the rosé. And so it lends an incredible amount of texture to the experience of drinking Granulino. And instead of with some Granulinos being a bit tannic, as we talked about earlier, being something that I totally caution away from when I'm doing Mexican street food, not too much tannin, and really thinking about the texture, I really like the way this Granulino goes with street tacos and goes quite a bit with suadero and with beef and with duck in particular. It's also great with turkey, both dark and light meat. Hillary, are you tasting it now?
Mm-hmm. So this has a lot of its own like unique flavors. So when I paired it with the duck, it's just like kind of a explosion in my mouth, like so much deliciousness going on. But I do like that high, like the little bit more tannin is kind of coating the back of my mouth and cutting through some of the fattiness in the duck, which is really nice. It's delicious.
Anybody else out there? Denise, anybody else have the Heights Granulino Rosé?
Yeah,
Open?
yeah, I have the Heights and the duck, and I agree with Hillary. I definitely pull out some apple notes, and then it also has this really neat, like, sort of mini effervescence to it that goes really well with the duck. So I think it's a fantastic pairing.
Has anyone on the call ever had Granulino Rosé, or has anybody ever had Heights Granulino Rosé? Is this the first time? So really, I think the main takeaway that I'd want to give you is if you're used to drinking Italian Granulino, this is kind of a outlier. But what we have here is the kind of return to the talk about temperature, texture, and taste. So there's a lot of taste components here with a little bit of tannin, like is also in the Fernandez Gomez special selection Rioja, which I love, from the Rioja Alavesa. There's just enough tannin to break down some of the structure in the meat, but there's not so much tannin that it overwhelms and creates a bitter component, because these are so savory and they're so delicious and they're meant to be fun. You know, the tradition of the choricera in Mexico City is so important because you never know when somebody's going to come to the food stall. You know, this is meant for a city of 20 million people. This is meant for people who are working. This is meant for people in the neighborhood. Street food is really about food right now and food fun. And so it's really important because with the choriceria, we talked about the food and the meats would be marinating in a soup of broth around with tripas and lingua and suadero all mixing together. And then the suadero, as soon as you order it, they would sear it on top, and then it goes in the taco, finished with cilantro and onion, a little bit of lime, and it's finished. And so you really want the flavors to be not only textural, but temperature. And so I want to talk a little bit about temperature as we move through also, and we're going to talk about the discada, which are the tacos I'm having right now. Temperature to me is not just about hot, medium, or cold. It's also about spice. And so I want to talk a little bit about how these wines work with spice. Some of the taco stands that I recommended offer some salsas on top that can be very, very spicy. And really, I think that when I think about pairing interior Mexican food or street tacos, the first component is how spicy am I going to make it? So you've got this textural component working. You've got what meats are you working with? You've got wines where you don't want them to be too tannic. And then the overwhelming factor that could decide which direction you're going in is how spicy is it? And how spicy do you like it? And so when I was young in the wine business, I think people always told me, you know, you need to have something like half dry Riesling when you have spicy food, you know, Asian or Mexican food in particular. But I like spicy food. So I don't want to make a decision for somebody else that they'd want to cut down on the spice. Maybe they want the spice to ramp up. So something to be mindful of is really intense tannins will really bring out the spicy elements. And the spicier thing you have, normally, if you want to cool down as a contrast, you're going to want a colder beverage in your mouth, and you're going to want some perception of sweetness and some intense fruit, because that will cool down the spice. So it depends on if you want to ramp up the spice or if you want to cool it down. And it could be either. And so I don't want to make a decision for anybody on that about which direction you want to go in. But that's why I chose the Albarino, because it has these really bright flavors and it also has great aromatics. And it has really intense fruit that Albarino can sometimes be perceived as having a sweetness, even though the wines are usually finished dry. Especially even the high quality producers have great acidity, but they're so intensely fruity and aromatic that they go really, really well. I think of them as taking the place of my favorite beer when I'm having a street taco. And I know that some of you have the Doferia open. Anybody else who has the Albarino open, which is enjoying it or agrees or disagrees or having a different experience with their tacos? Everybody's quiet. Anybody want to speak up? Mara, you're out there. Do you have any Albarino? What are you
here.
drinking?
No, I'm unfortunately, because I'm not in Austin, I don't have these particular wines or these fabulous tacos. I had to improvise, but
Mhm.
I wanted to say though that your comment about the tannin is really interesting, and I appreciate that because I'd always heard don't have a more tannic wine with spicy food. But I like spicy, so now I'm gonna try it because I'm gonna see how it might ramp up the spice in something that I already really love. So it's just something I had never thought about.
You can also, we didn't do it tonight, but you could also choose a half dry Riesling or a wine that has just a little bit of residual sugar and decide how much you want to ramp it up. So instead of having a sweet wine, you might have a half dry wine so that it might kind of balance it. And that's something fun to play with if you're going to do a white. I really feel like it also depends on this textural component you want and which meat you're choosing. So if you choose something like suadero, or you're choosing a beef stock and something that already has tannin, depending on which cut of the beef it's from, I think the tannin can be a nice component. You can tone it up or down also based on which salsa you decide to use and how much. And so it's really about the experience that you want to have. I really like quality rosé with pork, and I like it for pork chops, and I like it in every version it comes in. So for me, it's a really fun way to do food at every temperature, whether it's Thanksgiving or the Christmas meal, or whether it's Mexican street tacos. I think that rosé provides that great fruitness, and in many cases, depending on what you choose, an aromatic component. But it provides what we're used to in terms of the temperature, which is something cooling on the tongue while we have something that's really, really hot, like a flash fried, fresh street taco. And so I also encourage you, if you come home like I did Saturday night with the tacos, is to reheat them if you like that contrast between the heat in the food and the cool in the wine.
Yeah, I feel like when I take a bite of the duck taco and then a sip of the rosé, I get the spice on the back end, which is really great. It's delicious.
And Granulino also has a spice component. So the pips and kind of how Granulino is made, because this is a direct press, you get more of the direct flavor. It's not a saignée. And I really think that this in particular is great and kind of accentuate that spice without being overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons that I chose it. Sansi, what are you drinking?
Albarino.
Are you drinking? You're drinking Albarino?
Albarino, yeah.
That's right. That's such a favorite. Let's go to the Discata. Let's go to slide 3. So I want to take you guys through some of these slides because we're all experienced wine people here, but I'd want to make this less about teaching about wine and just talking about the pairings, why I chose them. I am eating the Discata tacos, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Discata and why I chose this along with Cuantos tacos. So this is on the corner of Rosewood, kind of in the 12th and 13th Street districts, if you guys have been there before. The Discata is a cooking implement that is named Discata because it is taken from Mexican farmers who would take the steel plow discs off the plow, cut them off, and then weld them to the base. They call it a cowboy walk. It's kind of a shorthand for what the Discata is. And you can see it in this picture that I've copied for you. I chose 2 that I thought were really good examples of how they're cooked. And you can see the one on top, which a lot of people do. They take a horseshoe and they make a handle out of it. So if you guys can see in the presentation, you can see that a lot of people will take the disc, they'll have it welded in some cases, and then they'll put the horseshoe in order to make a handle so you can carry it and put it on top of a propane source, which I've kind of showed you here so you can take a look, a lot like you would cook and prepare paella. The key here, and why Discata is a little bit different, is that these are always made from steel. And so this, instead of stainless steel or cast iron, provides a little bit different way of cooking. And it provides a little bit different way that you manage the heat. You really have to manage the heat really carefully when you do the Discata. And I really appreciate the guys that cook it and cook it correctly. The tradition around the Discata is to create kind of a hash. And so the tacos that I recommended tonight is a mix. It's beef, it's pork, it's mixed up. But a lot of people, when they do a traditional recipe, would mix the different kinds of meats with chorizo. And a very modern way of doing it is to add hot dogs and add potatoes bell peppers. I don't know if anybody's ever had it like that, but becomes kind of a meat hash that's mixed with potatoes. And then that stuffing is taken and put inside of the corn tortilla. And the discada is something that you can do at home. You can buy the Cowboy Walk. There's a couple really fun companies that do it for less than $100, $150, so you can have one at home, and you can go with different sizes. But traditionally you would cook the chorizo and the sausage down first and get that base level of fat like we were talking about. These tacos in particular, I think, are offer a really wide range of opportunities to pair wine with. And I think that in particular, I really like, as I've had some myself, the Fernandez Gomez Rioja Alavesa, which I think is a really nice pairing with these, all three wines, depending on which direction you want to go. But the discada is a really unique cooking implement. And I think that discada in Austin, if you want to try these tacos, is a great way to experience this style of cooking. Did anybody else go for discada? Nope. Jerry, did you get tacos? If he's still there.
I am. I was lucky to get wine. I'm on my way to a work dinner, but wasn't going to miss this because I was like salivating all week long thinking about it. But the session started yesterday, so I don't own my own calendar for the next 139 days, but I wanted to hear your presentation. I was drinking Pinot Noir earlier if that counts for anything.
It definitely does. This is just for fun. You know, we were out on
because the last time I had a class with you, it was the Pinot Noir class.
It was fun. It was fun.
Great. You did a great job.
So guys, let's move from the choricera, which to review is the big open circular pot that has the stand-up piece in the middle where you do the searing of the last elements, usually with suadero, and it's also where you put the tortillas to finish them. You put them in a little bit of the grease, you finish them. With the discada, you would take the tortillas and you would usually put them in a little bit of the grease and let them kind of keep hot while you're finishing the ingredients in the middle. To finish a complete discada, if you're going to do the potatoes and the whole thing, just kind of temperature time, once you get it to the right temperature, probably would take a full hour. So it's something where you could open the wine, start pouring and enjoying with friends that are with you, or if your family is quarantined in the backyard, it's something that you can also do outside right now, even in the colder months where you've got a fire going, to have people that you're comfortable socializing with in an outdoor environment, which I think is another reason I thought the discada was something fun to talk about, because it really fits for how we're living right now. The next thing is the tortillas. So when you eat fresh tortillas like this, there's kind of an element of mixing the corn with water, or the corn kernels, and then calcium hydroxide. In the days of the Aztecs, the food anthropologists talk about the fact that they used ash in order to get the separation between the corn kernels and the nutrients, the B vitamins, all of the riboflavins, everything that comes out of the corn kernel when you separate the kernel and the husk, and all the goodness that comes out, which is why this process has really become very important, and really why a lot of taquerias are using these tortillas because of the freshness and because they release so many distinct flavors. And they also add a layer of complexity, which creates, to me, another textural element, which makes it really good to pair with wine, because sometimes beer is cool and cold and fast, but there's so much more complexity and layered textures in wine that I think, in the case of having these fresh tortillas and having this fresh food made in this way, adds another layer of complexity, and really not only takes place kind of in the middle front of your mouth, but goes all the way back and gives you really long finish. And these corn tortillas have this extra layer of complexity because they're made fresh, which means you got to eat them fast. Otherwise, the texture can change, and they're so much better for you. There's no preservatives in them at all. And so you make them and you eat them quickly. And as you kind of stir, if you guys have ever watched this process done, you stir the corn in the water with the calcium hydroxide, it turns into an alkaline solution, which is the solution that allows the husk to separate and all those nutrients to come out. And this is something I think that I'm really grateful that in South Texas especially, but certainly all over Mexico, I think we're seeing more and more of this process, and chefs use this traditional method for making the corn tortillas and for producing really delicious. And I think, you can really taste the difference in the tacos. And I took this picture that's in the presentation at Cuantos Tacos. All of these stands and all of these restaurants that I chose are going to use 100% nixtamal tortillas. Has anybody made them before? Anybody had that experience? Not yet. Maybe we should have a class with a chef that's doing it, which would be fun. Somebody who's using.
I've made my own tortillas, but never nixtamalized my own corn. That seems like a step.
It's a full weekend.
A step too far for the
weekend thing. Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to highlight that these local taquerias, Discada, Cuantos Tacos, Nixta Taqueria, really great local places. And for all the people that weren't here tonight and just people that we can share this with, I hope people will share this experience and support these local people that are doing very authentic presentations of this food. I want to go to the vocab, the next slide. If you guys can see this, I didn't want to make it too complicated. I wanted to make it fun, but I wanted to put the vocab in here that I've learned. As some of you may know, my partner is Mexican and all of her best friends are Mexican, and we spent time in Mexico City. And when I first met her best friend who grew up in Mexico City, she kept calling her a chilango. And I was like, is that a bad word? Is that a bad name? So that was my ignorance, but chilango is just a person from Mexico City. So I think it's a really nice element here, because you call someone a true chilango, you can ask them a lot of questions about what Mexican street food is like and really their favorite places to go when you're in Mexico City. Another thing that I think is really fun that they taught me in the very beginning and I've seen now quite a bit is that you need to know the difference between asking for a copy when you're at the taco stand. So if they give you one taco, like these taquitos that I got, they're slightly fried, so they almost become like a hard shell taco. But when you eat the Cuantos tacos, they're not at all, and they're extremely fresh. And so you have to ask for a copy, which means you want two. So there's so much in the taco, you ask for a copy if you want two. Some people want it to fall apart and eat it so quick that they just need one. But if you're the type of person that needs a bowl around your taco, you ask for a copy, and that means you want two for the taco. And I feel like normally when you eat discada, it's such a hash of meat and potatoes and bell peppers and all these things. I find it, if those are the traditional tacos or if you're serving them at home, it's really nice to serve it with a copy, because it makes it so much easier for your guests, especially if they feel uncomfortable eating that kind of food or maybe are not as accustomed to it. It's a nice way to be very authentic about the food also. And something that I think is great with the textural components of all the wines that I chose tonight is they all have great texture. And so when you add another element of the second layer of the corn tortilla, it becomes a much more dominant flavor in the taco, and you need something a little bit stronger. So something like the Fernandez Gomez is a great selection for that also. And the nixtamalization, which is the ancient process we talked about originating. They say that the tradition is maybe 3,500 years old. And I'm not an expert of this, but I've begun to spend a lot of time in the past couple of years eating at Mixley and eating in Mexico City and trying to experiencing these different expressions of this ancient technique, and also the quality of the food, the tacos, and the fact that it's better for you as well. So I thought the vocab was fun to just kind of have this. Did anybody know about asking for a copy before, or is that something new? Something new? Good.
New.
I've done one good thing. So I want to just briefly go over the wines tonight, because I know we normally focus on the wines, but something that I've been delighted with in my career is all the foods that I have tasted and all the chefs that have helped me experience wines in a different way and in a new way by presenting different foods to me that I then needed to pair wine with. And so this is kind of how I thought about this exercise. Sans, you have the Albarino, you said, correct? I think a lot of people
I do.
Yeah, okay.
I think, yeah, probably a few.
I'm going to put that in my glass right now. And then the Fernandez Gomez Rioja Alavesa. I want to talk just a little bit about why the Rioja Alavesa is a very interesting place. And they're kind of The best producers from there are kind of in a little bit of an uproar right now, and they are threatening to secede from the Rioja and the Alavesa in particular, that they would have their own kind of DO. So that's interesting. And then a little bit about the Heights Granulino Rosé. So just returning a little bit to when I'm thinking about texture and taste and temperature, in the case of these tacos, these were the elements that I started thinking about. With those three things in mind, what ingredients do I have to pair? Which wines would I choose? Let me grab the Albarino and I will put it up on the slide. Can we go to, as you scroll through, can you go to slide number 7 and then slide number 9 if you haven't already?
I can't see the slide numbers because I'm on full screen, but I have the 3 wines in front of me. Is that the one you want?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
And then the ingredients to pair would be the next slide.
Yep, got it.
So just keeping these things in mind. And like I said before, my experience has been that some people that like aguacate or avocado will sometimes throw it on one of these tacos, but that creates an entirely different layer of fat and unctuousness, which can be fun. I really like adding the avocado when I'm adding the Albarino. The taste and the complexity, the really layered taste profile there is awesome. So if anybody had avocado at home and they're adding that, the avocado also works great with the lime because you have these really high tone textural components with the lime, kind of zesty. It's almost jumping off your tongue. And an avocado is just like a bass drum, layering more and more flavor and providing kind of a sense of fat again for everything to lay on top of. And I think that Albarino, to me, almost describes what happens when you put lime on the top of a taco. You have really high tone, beautiful, fresh acidity, and you have really complex fruit and aromatic components, which is what happens when you put cilantro on the taco. And then you have onion, which adds an unctuousness and almost like a feeling of salinity. And Albarino always has this sense of salinity. It's right there from the coast, and we pair seafood with it a lot. But when you think about pairing it with a taco, then it has this kind of base complexity that matches really well. So for me, Albarino, as you go top to bottom, is really one of the best pairings I can think of, even with pork and beef tacos. I really enjoy that because I usually almost eat them with cilantro, lime, and the traditional way with onion. And that salinity really breaks through because onion can be such a strong flavor. Is there anybody that's adverse to onion that didn't put it on their tacos tonight or likes to avoid that when they're pairing as a topping?
My son took them off of his, but he's also not drinking the wines.
Does he ever like onions or just not on his tacos?
I feel like just not on his tacos. He said it was making it spicy, but he really liked the Pescado tacos overall. He gave them a thumbs up.
That's nice. You know, it's interesting. I'm going to open this fresh bottle here. It's interesting that he says onions are spicy, and certainly they can be. I think in most cases we use like sweet Texas white onions or kind of Vidalia style white onions in Mexican cooking. And so there is a sweetness, but there's also a spicy component, which I think works well if you like the spice and can go really well. Instead of a lot of spicy salsa, the onions can be the source of both kind of the savory and sometimes salinity. And in this case, spice. That's a really good comment.
Moxy, can you talk about cilantro? That seems like something that would be really difficult to pair with. So could you maybe talk about that, about what you play off of there?
You know, there's kind of an old rule that I don't stick to, but it's a good place to start from. You can say like the color of the herb or the spice is also maybe the color of the wine you would think of. So if there's a wine much like Sauvignon Blanc or Vallota, which you'd find in Spain, or Albarino, that throws a green tone in the glass instead of silver, where it's more herbal. You'd also think of Gruner Veltliner having this characteristic. Sansi or anyone jump in if you can think of others, but these are the 4 that I'd really start thinking of. Then they go really well with light, fresh, green herbs. Some herbs are harder to pair with than others. Chervil, for example, is really nice with savory French food. But in this case, there's also something about Ayurvedic cooking, which I learned a long time ago. I lived and managed the UT Women's Co-ops when I was at UT. And I took a lot of macrobiotic and Ayurvedic cooking classes at the time because I lived with women from all over the world. And in order to survive at UT and make enough money to get through it, I managed the house. And so I had to cook. And what I learned is that cilantro from the Ayurvedic cooking side is a cooling herb, which is why it's used in a lot of very spicy food, because on top it provides a cooling element, whereas ginger and garlic heat up dishes. Cilantro and mint, primarily, along with other herbs if you want to classify them, are cooling herbs. And so cilantro, you can think of it always having this cooling property, and you can think of it having this very aromatic component. So when I put food together with wine, I always think of a wine like this Albarino that has an aromatic component working really well with light herbs like basil and mint and cilantro. Now, some people perceive cilantro as tasting soapy. And if you do, I just avoid it anyway, but I really like cilantro, and I like this kind of flat and aromatic element that cilantro brings when it's fresh cut. Does that answer any questions? Does that bring up any questions? Does that even sound right in terms of your experience with cilantro and cooking and wine pairing?
That was great.
I just liked your comment about how if it's casting a green note in the glass, then look to pair that with other fresh herbs, because it's like, that seems so obvious, but I never thought about that before. So I will do that.
You know, when we think about how we break wine down, it becomes this taxonomy that you get when they teach you to be a sommelier. And I think it's good in some ways. You're like, okay, great. What grows together goes together. And what am I tasting? Okay, so things that are terpenes and pyrazines and all that stuff, they're grouped together. So I think in terms of learning what to pair, clustering ideas together helps us. So I think this is useful when you think about this green tinge. At the same time, I think that's a very Western concept and something we've gotten used to. But I really think a lot of when I'm cooking and pairing about the Ayurvedic elements. So what's the temperature of the herb? What does it do to your body? And so I really think about cilantro and mint specifically being really cooling herbs. And that's a nice component to add if you hadn't thought about that before. And primarily because we cook with it all the time, garlic, and then introduced into a lot of Asian street food and a lot of food I eat is garlic, which is ginger, which is a heating herb. So, and those things, when you think about ginger and garlic, I tend to think of them like if I were given them a color, I would think orange or red. They already have kind of a heating element to me when I think about if I had to assign a color to them. So if we can go to the next slide that has Albarino, I just want to share, I'm sure everybody on this call knows where Albarino is, but where it's from. But Galicia, the northwest corner of Spain on top of Portugal, this is actually where my grandmother is from. This part of the world, it's absolutely dominated by seafood and by the seafood culture there. And I think a lot of people think of Albarino, of course, when you think of shellfish. It's one of the first things that I think of. But the element that I wanted to bring out in showing this slide, besides making sure everybody knows where it's from, is that there is a salinity in the wine that I think is really killer with these tacos. Whether you went with the duck or whether you went with beef or pork, there's a savory and salinity component just to the wine itself when you taste it. Albarino, to me, if it's from a quality producer, almost has in the mid palate, almost like a glycerin feel. It just washes over my tongue. It's got great acidity and I can feel it here where the acid comes. But in the mid palate and across my tongue, it's just yummy. And it has kind of a thickness that I really appreciate that as a white wine, I think can go with, like I said, a lot of pork dishes and with things that we traditionally think about, red meats. And I really like it also with tomatillo. So in some cases, some of the salsas that you guys might have ordered, and they do a green salsa at Discada, if you decide to put a salsa on top of the ingredients you also have. Tomatillos, when you think about making green salsa, if you're going to use them, they have a very tangy, fresh, almost acidic taste profile. And so if you like green salsas that are tomatillo based instead of just jalapeno or cream based, I really like albarino as a pairing if you're going to choose that as a topping on your tacos. And salsa can be very difficult to pair, but again, think about the base ingredients. Is it really driven by tomatoes and garlic and roasted peppers, or is it driven by fresh peppers like jalapenos, serrano, or things like tomatillo? And what's the acid level of the salsa? So I think when you think about salsa, you can think about them in terms of how hot are they, and then think about, are they really kind of a cooling green vegetable side? And that would really lend you toward what wines would pair with them. And then are they more towards red fruits and red herbs and spice? Even those things can be roasted. And those things I think really lend themselves to being great with the Rioja. And in this case, the Granilino Rosé. Does that make sense in terms of salsa? I don't know if you guys have thought about that before. That's just the way I think about it. And I'm not a chef. But as I've paired a lot of things and think about cooking, that's just one tack that I take to think about how I'm going to pair it. The next thing is the Rioja. I wanted to explore that with you all. Did anybody get the Rioja? Is that a big fat no?
That's yes, their hands waving.
So the Rioja here selected the Fernandez Gomez family. This is an interesting wine, and I encourage you to sample it, even if you didn't tonight. I put a map here. If we can go to the next slide with the Rioja Alavesa, which is the northernmost part of the Rioja. It's kind of divided. It's kind of like it has a left foot and a right foot above the Rioja Baja, northwest of, and then above the Rioja Alta. There are a lot of really quality producers in the Rioja Alavesa who are a little bit wanting to secede. They feel like in some cases, Rioja producers have used the ability to blend and have taken a really high quality Rioja Alavesa old vines and blended them maybe with less quality, higher production volume, and are maybe diluting the quality that people would think of from this area. And Fernandez Gomez, this family, is a multi-generational wine family. And they are amongst this cadre of people that feel like their quality is being diluted. And instead of just making a crianza, if you're drinking this wine with me, if you're interested in investigating again, this vintage, the 2015, is the first time that the family has put the family selection or the selection familia on this bottle. And I think it's a really interesting expression because it's hand selected lots from their older vine parcels. They already have a base of old vines, which are about 40 years old, but they have made a hand selection of their primary lots to produce this wine, which is kind of a step above the crianza if you had tasted it back in previous vintages. So I think this is a really nice step out to see what the family is doing. And I just want to retaste it. This wine to me with the Suadero was my favorite of the pairings. The Suadero being the what we think of as like a beef brisket, but made in the traditional style, has so many flavors going on. There's just so much happening. This does have a little bit of tannic structure. It's Tempranillo, but it doesn't have enough to dominate the food. And so to me, it is a really nice companion and doesn't overwhelm the street tacos. And a lot of people prefer red wine also. And I wanted to make sure that there was a really good example of something that didn't have too much tannin and didn't accelerate the heat or overwhelm the food, but had a really nice pairing component. I think the important thing about Rioja is to choose a quality producer. There are a lot to choose from, but I think you can generally attest to, in most cases, the producers in the Rioja Alavesa and the Alta, there being a lot of really quality and the benchmark producers for Rioja here. And because there's so much tie between the Spanish culture and the Mexican culture, I thought it was a really good way to investigate because a lot of Tempranillo has been planted in Mexico and in Texas as a result of the connection with Spain. And even in Napa, some of the original plantings, because Napa as a place was really all about Spanish and Italian varietals until probably the late 80s when Cabernet started to take over. I can tell you at Heights, we have Tempranillo planted. We have over 20 varietals planted, including the Grignolino. And that's really the history of most of the places, is borrowing from the texture and the history of the places they came from. And that's why I think it's really fun to mix these flavors, because Mexico is a land and a culture that is full of the native peoples and the Aztec culture that was there. And then the Spanish conquest of Mexico and all the influence of the cultures that have landed there. And I think what we have with Mexican street tacos now is a mix of that kind of traditional, but with sometimes, like you guys experienced with the duck tacos, some new ingredients and not just traditional flavors. So maybe we can go to the Grignolino Rosé. I know a lot of you guys chose that wine, and this is a really unique example of Grignolino. Mara, when will you be back in Austin? When will you be able to come get some street tacos?
When it's safe to
travel, right?
Leave. Yeah, that's kind of we haven't been there since February. But we love Heights, so we were excited about this wine being included too.
I didn't even know that they made a rosé. I have a soft spot for Heights. When I first started learning about wine, that was the place everyone told me to go to, and I was nobody, and I was a law student. I had no money, and they must have spent 2 hours with me just talking through things. Of course, I can talk a lot. So
it took about 20 years, but it paid off, and now we buy a lot more from them. But
it was delayed gratification on their part, but yeah.
Well, it's a sweet thing always to
but
have
this looks
memories.
really interesting.
It's a sweet thing to have memories. You guys, I think, can maybe see on the slide the Grignolino varietal red wine visitors welcome on the Heights sign that I put up in the slide right after the Rioja slide, and then the picture of the Grignolino Rosé. Because I work for Heights, and I want everybody to know that, so I'm not trying to pull a fast one on you in here and sell you something without you knowing that, but it's a really interesting wine. And when I was running D&E, we sold this wine particular to the McGuire Mormon Group. They were a big fan. We don't make a lot of it. But in 1961, when Joe and Alice Heights bought the original property, it was 8 acres. And what they bought was 8 acres of Grignolino. They bought it from a man named Leon Brindell. And it's interesting, and I thought this wine was fun for a lot of reasons, but the last reason is Leon Brindell was an Alsace winemaker, but he got called to Mexico by President Madero to found and make the wines at Casa Madero in Mexico. So by way of Alsace, the tradition of France and European community in winemaking, down to Mexico and into Napa. And he planted 8 acres of Grignolino. And so the original Heights property was Grignolino. The Heights family had to buy wine from Hansel for the first 3 years so they could have Chardonnay in 1961, 2, and 3, because they didn't have any plantings that they could use. So the Grignolino Rosé, there was a handshake deal between Leon Brindell and between Joe and Alice Heights. And they said, could you please never pick it up? I know your plan is to buy more and become a little bit larger, but we've never picked it up. We still have 8 acres. We actually grafted it, but we have 8 acres. We moved it off the highway to a little higher location so it could have benchland soils instead of just valley floor. So for those of you that have it, thank you for supporting it. But most importantly, it's a really interesting exercise in the history of the Napa Valley, which to me is the tie back to the Italian and the Spanish varietals, and the fact that we have Tempranillo growing there, which is also kind of how Mexico got its varietals. So there's a very healthy, growing, beautiful wine culture in Mexico, in the Valle de Guadalupe and in Ensenada, which is an amazing thing to taste. There's so many things there that we don't see in the United States. But I thought it was interesting to do this because we sometimes take for granted that the wine world and the food world that we live in right now is the world that it's always been. And when you think about the ingredients that we would think about for Mexican street tacos and how we have kind of devolved and gone back to the way corn tortillas were made. And this evolution of going back to the way it was, I think the granulino is a good example of that. So this is a direct press, and I think you'll notice in the color that you have quite a bit of fresh color. The vintage is 2018, which is the current vintage. And you have an amazing palate on this wine. It's delicious, and it texturally, it just, to me, it works with almost everything. We opened it on Thanksgiving because there were so many different kinds of food at the table that I usually serve all sauce, and I usually serve a good Pinot Noir, and oftentimes another aromatic white. But I also served this year because it went with everything we had on the table. You can kind of get here the floral component almost also. There's almost like a violet or even like a rose petal component. And there's a savory element that I get here that I love. It's almost like Tavel instead of like Provençal, very light pink rosé. And I also think it's fun because a lot of Spanish rosés have this component where they have a lot more palate and they have a little bit of texture, and you might even pick up some tannin. It occasionally happens in some red champagnes that I really like, but I really like this component, and I think it's a way to get white and red drinkers together. And if you don't know what to pair, choose a really high quality rosé or champagne, you'll never go wrong. Mara, I think you're on mute, but I think you were saying something. I wanted to hear what you were saying.
I was just telling Dan what I was sniffing in my glass. Sorry.
Tell us, even if it's dirt, we'll take it. If it's saucy, we'll take it too.
I'm drinking a Syrah from California, and it's got a little more, even more acidity than I was expecting, and but it's got that pepper note at the end that I love in a Syrah. I love the kind of pepperiness, spicy kindness of it. So it's good.
Me too.
It was unexpected. It would probably be good with some tacos.
I think one of the things too that kind of refreshes my mind as I eat the tacos is that wines that have complexity and acidity work really well with foods like this, because a taco you keep taking bites of. You don't eat the meat and then eat the starch and then eat the salad. Some people only eat one thing on their plate at a time, but when you eat a taco, every single flavor goes in your mouth at one time. So it's like a layer cake every time you eat it. So you're getting every single flavor instead of isolated flavors. And so I think we talked about in the beginning, texture and complexity being a big thing about tacos, because they're supposed to be simple and fun. You're just going to go get them on your work hour or when you're done out partying or drinking or whatever it is that you're doing, or just having dinner. But you really, I think, need a wine in order for it to be fun to play with, that has enough acidity that every bite you take tastes new, which is why you would serve champagne or high acid whites with fried food. And why I like these wines like this rosé that has a really nice fresh acidity, and a wine like Albarino, and why there's tannin, but not too much tannin in the Rioja Alavesa, which makes every bite fresh. Because again, you also have quite a bit of a fatty component here, which is a very savory, beautiful component of all these tacos. And that's a really important thing that you can kind of break through with every taste, so that each bite of the taco is like your first bite, which I like. I know I'm the slowest eater, but I was doing the most talking. So I wish you guys were at my house and I was cooking over a discada for you. Maybe when it's safe to do that, we could redo this in person, and we can invite a couple chefs, or we could do an event where people did a BYOB and we had a bunch of traditional street tacos and kind of street Mexican food around us. It'd be fun to do an outdoor event that was safe, but still have community together.
Yeah, I think we should consider that a personal invitation, because I think that would be a great way to get us all together and experience this in person with these delicious flavors. I know I loved the pairing of the duck with all of these wines, honestly, and I think it would be really fun to do this in person and get to have that experience with all of you and not just be doing this virtually via our computers. So I hope we can make that happen soon.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I know some of you have wanted to talk and some of you have not, but when I teach, I try to recap. So I just want to leave you with a couple things that I think are fun. And then I made a link sheet for you guys, just 2 things really simple. And if you have more curiosity and you find out, please share with us. Please share with me if you think there's something that I would love or missed in kind of what I shared tonight. But I didn't want to really see myself as a teacher, but kind of as a guest or a guide, as if I were taking you on a taco truck walk and taking some of my favorite wines with us. So the main components that I think of when I think of pairing are temperature, texture, and taste. And I know taste is important, but I usually lead with the other 2 first, because I think that that's where you kind of get the surprise and the delight. Taste is important, but when you start thinking about temperature, either the hot, cold, or the spice, this is where you really get people's mouths to wake up. And so I think it's really fun to think about that. And then texture. For me, all these wines and this food and the way you eat tacos, as I said before, really presents an opportunity to think about texture. Tacos in particular is in any food you eat with your hands, where you take the whole bite of the food. Tacos in particular is a really complex flavor bomb every time you take a bite. And I think that's why we love them. They're easy, they're quick, and they're delicious. I don't think we would live without them in Austin, Texas. But when you come to pairing, textural component is important. When you think about what goes together and pairing, I think cilantro and onion will always be the very classic finished preparation for all of these style street tacos. And so closing with kind of cilantro as an herb, which represents kind of a cooling element on the food, and has an aromatic component of its own. I also believe that cilantro has a textural component. I think it's almost, I'm going to say sticky, almost like when you get a wine that's a little dusty. It has a textural component, which I like, but I always consider because it's a unique ingredient. But remembering that anything that kind of shows a green hue in a glass of wine is nicely paired with fresh herbs like basil, chervil, cilantro, mint, and that cilantro and mint tend to Ayurvedically be on the cooling side, and ginger and garlic Ayurvedically tend to be on the warming or heating side. And then one of the other takeaways is the element of how are they cooking it. So we first talked about the trompa, which is brought to Mexico by Lebanese immigrants and brought their tradition of the slow cooked rotisserie meat, and that's usually for al pastor. Then we talked about the choricera, which is the round dish, often done stainless steel or aluminum alloy, and that has the raised centerpiece where we make like what our version of suadero, which is kind of like a brisket taco, but it's also where you do the tripas and the tongue and all the other meats. They cook all together. And then when you're finished, you take the tortillas with a little bit of fat, you flash them so they get just barely crisp. And then you put the meat, finish with the cilantro and the onion and the lime. And those can easily be purchased also, but you find them more often in a professional taco stand. And then the last thing, which we spend a little time on, which we call the cowboy walk or the discada. You can make one if you know a welder, if you are a welder, but kind of can also, if you are someone who's used to making paella or doing that or want to explore that, you could put the cowboy walk on top of the same that you would do and just exchange in terms of a paella pan. And that the discada is made from steel, and that managing the heat on the steel surface is a little bit different. You really have to watch it. And that the tradition there is to make a hash of meat. You can add potatoes, traditionally bell peppers, and usually finished in the same way. And that the discada in Austin is a really good place to go experience that. They also have fresh corn, the Mexican street corn. Hillary, I know that you bought some corn today, and I want to appreciate the fact that you did that on my suggestion. For those of you who are eating Mexican street corn, another really good place in town, which is kind of an Americanized version, but they do a great job, is Fresas. My to-be mother-in-law makes probably the best I've ever seen, because she has bitter oranges growing in her backyard. And instead of just lime, she uses the bitter orange when she mixes the citrus in with the mayo and the spice. And in that case, if you're having that opportunity, that's more of a component of comparison. And that's where I think the Albarino is a total standout. And in this case, the Granulino also, but the Albarino has so much texture and it has so much fresh citrus and acidity. It is incredible with street corn. And then kind of thinking about the wines, I chose these. I really respect all of them, but these are three great producers, I think, that don't break the bank, that are doing something unique. They're all using old vines and high quality ingredients. They're all not super easy to find, but not super difficult to find. And that usually is an indication to me that you have something unique that's quality, but that you can get your hands on it, which is great. These are all the current vintages, just in case there were questions there. So these are the current offerings. And I want to close by saying that I made the links for you. So if you see the last page, the Texas Monthly, as you guys may know, has a taco editor, and that's all he does. And he writes really fun articles, and he spends a lot of time researching the anthropology. And I've been reading his posts on puffy tacos and where the best are to get in the state of Texas, and when you're traveling, where to go. He's created a Tacopedia. And I don't know if anybody's seen it. Has anybody read this before? Or is this the first time you've seen the Tacopedia? Yeah?
I've seen it. It's awesome.
It's amazing. It explains all the different kinds of meats, the names, where they come from, bisteca and lingua, and kind of where these things come from, if it's not obvious, where the meat the animal comes from, how it's cooked, and a little bit about the history. There's some fun pop art in there. It's a great place to go. It's a great place. I'll say this because I'm dating a Mexican. It's a great place for gringas and gringos, and it's also a place for chilangos. So my friends that are from Mexico City also appreciate this, because you sometimes take for granted that you know something just because it's in your own culture, but they are learning a lot of things as I learn a lot of these things. And then my Spanish teacher, I have a private Spanish tutor so I can learn to speak to my future father-in-law. And I've been doing that for about a year. And about a year ago, she recommended to me the Taco Chronicles so that I could practice my Spanish, knowing that I love food. And I left you the link here. There's 2 seasons that are really fun to watch about all different kinds of tacos and street food. There is a specific episode, probably the 3rd or 4th that I watched on Suadero. And it will really explain, it's no more than 40 minutes, maybe a little less than that. And it really explains and lets you see how the tacos are made and some of the culture behind it. And they do a fun anthropology piece too on asking for a copy, a 1 taco or 2 tacos, so it doesn't fall apart in your hand. So I hope that those are good places that if you're curious about learning more, or if you had fun with these tonight and want to explore more, that the links are there for you. And I want to thank Hillary, who made all of this setup possible, and Denise, who filled in for me while I was in traffic getting my discada. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing the presentation that I'd sent and walking everybody through it. You guys were very patient. I wish we could have done it in person, because that is much more fun, but I find the ability to connect with you guys still really gratifying, to see you and to share this with you. So if there's anything you guys want to say too, I mean, I wish you were in my living room. That's the most important thing. Any questions about the wines or the foods or the pairings or selections that I made?
I don't have any questions, but I would just say that I hadn't had a chance to visit some of the places that you recommended that are actually like super close to my house. So I was very happy to try them out. Everything was delicious, and I really enjoyed all the wines, but the Albarino was a standout for me. I thought it was like everything that we got, like it was just, so I will be getting that again.
I love that, Hillary. I always feel like this wine, every time I have it, and it's gone through a little bit of a package change recently. Every single time I drink it, no matter what vintage it is, it always surprises me how good it is for the money. I love this wine.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because it validates, we get a myopia about our own perspective, especially we're in the wine business. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I love this format too, Moxy. I think this is a great way to, we like you said, we focus a lot on the wines. We do a lot of wine tastings, and we talk about pairings, but to kind of come to the table with, this is what you should come to the table with. I think this really makes a lot of sense, and it made it really fun. So as always, your creativity is what we love about you, and this has been a really fun way to taste wines and taste it with the foods that we here in Texas eat most often. So this has been amazing. We really appreciate it.
And I want to apologize to all of you for being late. The fact that I was lost in traffic, I just should have gone with all my pairings from Saturday. I thought it would be way better to eat these hot with them, and I made a mistake in judgment. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. It was great. I mean, I think everyone enjoyed the pairings and what you brought to the table, and the level of detail and depth on your knowledge on how to pair these with tacos, which people, pish posh and shouldn't. I think we've all learned a lot tonight. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Is there anything that anybody wants to share that they learned that was like, wow, I didn't think about that, or that will be their one takeaway? I guess it would help me as I share what is the one thing that I conveyed that's actually interesting that you're going to go play with in the future. If you're willing to share as we close, that would be interesting for me.
I'm intrigued by I'm intrigued by the rosé, the grape Grignolino. I don't think I've ever had it, so I'm going to go seek it out and specifically try to find that wine.
That's fun. When you pair it, definitely choosing a high quality producer is good, because it's got to be a producer that's focused on making it because it's Grignolino, not just as an aside or a field blend, in my opinion, because you get so little juice when you press it. You need a high quality producer that's not going to overpress Grignolino and get the bitter part of it. It needs to be a high quality producer that is only going to make great Grignolino and is not going to try to squeeze all the juice out of there. So if you go to the Merchant or Twins, they'll take you in the right direction, or wine.com, but just looking for a high quality producer because of the nature of the grape, I think is important if you want to try it more.
Great. Well, if no one has any other questions or anything to add, I think we can wrap up tonight. And Moxy, again, cannot thank you enough. This was a super fun session, and I think we all learned a lot and ate some pretty delicious food and drank some great wine. So thank you so much.
I'm super grateful to all of you guys. I hope that we can do more of these where I can learn from someone else, so they have a passion like I do for these street tacos. That'd be super fun.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take you up on your offer, and we'll schedule this as a Wine and Food Foundation event when it's safe for us all to gather, hopefully sooner than later. So thank you again. Thank you to all of our members and guests. We're so glad you were here with us. I know, this dry January thing seems to be happening, but I'm glad to see that there are others like me who don't believe in that. And hope to see you all. Hope to see you all next week. So again, our schedule is up on our website. We've got tasting next Thursday and the following Wednesday. So we've got a lot going on. Hope to see you. And if you do want to participate next Thursday in La Dolce Vita, again, a reminder, our registration deadline is this Saturday. So please be sure to register in advance. Thank you again, everyone. Have a great night. Enjoy your wine and tacos.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. Thanks for your patience.